Okay. Hello, everybody. Warm welcome to this very special interview. I'm John Higgins. I'm one of the writers for filmandtvnow.com, and I'm delighted to be speaking with Amy Brandis, who's the writer and director of this brand new short called Screw the Pooch, which is playing currently until April the 18th at the London Independent Film Festival, which is an online event which has been going for a while, which is coordinated by Natasha Marberger. So welcome, Amy. Glad to see you here. Thanks very much.
Lovely
for
to see
time
you.
with us. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so yes, let's get cracking on the actual questions I've got for you. I'm just going to put those up now, and we'll get cracking. Okay, so let's go. The film very much reflects the mindset caused by the pandemic. So how long did it take you to conceive and write the script for the short?
Good question, because it evolved into lots of different shapes before it landed in a script form. I suppose I began in August of 2020, so right at the height of when we were going back into that very intense lockdown, and it began as an almost diary entry when I was just absolutely furious at the situation and the loss that I was seeing, and how it was affecting people in very different ways, and it was hurting certain parts of society much more than others. So I was very angry about that, and it came out as a monologue and evolved over 2 to 3 months into a script. So about 2 to 3 months before I thought, yeah, no, this needs to be a short that in an ideal world we would make on quite a short time frame.
Okay, so tell us about your cast, because I understand who's because I understand your one of your relatives plays Death.
That would be my father. Yeah, it was that was a really fun experience. We had the extraordinarily talented Nadia Lamin, who played our lead. She's an actor that I've wanted to work with for years, and we were very lucky to get her. At the same time, we had a very practical restriction on productions. We wanted to limit our numbers as much as possible. Now, this sounds like I'm making excuses for my dad. He's a brilliant performer, so it was also a real honor to have him play the role. But he's not a professional actor and was quite trepidatious about playing the character. But, you know, after he's, read the script, he was like, yeah, call my agent, let's do this. And he was absolutely brilliant in the role. We've had some wonderful reviews about his physical comedy, so I'm really proud of him. It was absolutely hilarious on set.
I mean, it always reminds, the one thing that always reminds me when I think of this, I think of the young ones. And I always think of, that kind of abstract, very weird, not quite unstructured comedy that sort of defined the classic Ben Elton, Lisa Mayer, Rick Mayall thing. And I always remember,
thank you.
no, but that's the thing. It's when I look at that, I'll pick up on things and I think, well, the thing is, it's always difficult because I quite like the idea in the short when towards the end of it. I mean, I'm not going to give away any spoilers, but I like the fact that, he became, when he's dancing, I thought, great, Death is dancing. I thought that's a really cool thing. But it's always good when, so because I always sort of, when I see films, I'm always generalizing, seeing, well, let's have a look. And I always take a look at the geography of the piece. But no, that's great. I mean, I think he did really well.
Yeah, I think you did too.
Yeah, okay. So tell us about your production team.
Yep. So this was, I suppose you could call it a real family affair, because my brother and I were leading the production. My brother is far more talented and capable than I am, and he was the director of photography. He also did a lot of the technical support on set, and then we had some brilliant production assistants, including Amy Nicholas, who were there on hand to make sure that we had, all of our sound in place and our lighting, etc. So it was a very small team, less than 10 people at one time, and some of it was also filmed at my parents' house. So it really was a very close contact experience working with a lot of family members. But it was just a joy to be able to just exploit my brother's talent, really, and use him for all he was worth. So he led the vision, I suppose you could say.
Great. Well, actually, that leads me on to your next question. Obviously, you've just mentioned one of the locations, but I just want to talk a little bit about the outside locations and for how long, because obviously we do see, there's scenes where, death is following you in an open space and stuff, and you have the dog there and you're going up some hill. I mean, I know that the credits mention Henley. I mean, that was one of the credits. So tell us a bit more about your locations and where you were shooting. I mean, obviously, given what the restrictions were, I mean, I'll expand on the question as well. I mean, how did you manage to sort of maintain the kind of the respect of the restrictions while you were shooting in the external areas?
Yeah, and that's a major consideration as well, because of course you're there to do a job, it is work, it is legally allowed, but you don't want to upset a community, you don't want to put anybody else at risk that's not in that specific bubble, because we were in bubbles at the time in the UK. But the film was shot in Henley-on-Thames in Oxfordshire in the UK, and I'm really proud of that location. That sounds odd to say, but the film was struggling with funding in the early stages, and I approached a handful of businesses in Henley, all of whom had shop fronts in Henley, and all of whom had been closed for the best part of a year and had taken that financial hit. And I said, despite what you've been through, do you think that you could donate anything to an auction to help us raise money? And people absolutely came out in strength. Nobody needed to do that, but we had people donating everything from an experience with a racehorse to clothing to vouchers, all sorts. And ultimately it was that auction that helped us fund the film. So we shot in the beautiful Oxfordshire countryside, which, if you've been, it's very dramatic landscapes. You've got the Chiltern Hills nearby, and Henley is a very special place because you could be there 300 years ago and it looks the same. So if you ever want to shoot a period piece, go for it. But so really it was just a kind of agreement with the community, and I felt I had their blessing when we got such amazing support from these local businesses to fund the film and then shoot around town, always of course away from the general public, including getting up very early in the morning to avoid all the dog walkers. But yeah, that's our story, and I'm so thankful.
Well, funnily enough, you seem to be reading my mind, Amy, because that was going to be my next question in terms of how you did raise finance. I mean, obviously, you've mentioned that that's a fantastic way of raising finance. I mean, obviously, before that, I mean, you said that you were struggling to raise finance. I mean, where were the blocks for that? Because did you do your Kickstarting? Did you raise, who did you initially go to before you had to rely on the charity of good people in the community?
So we went straight to a Kickstarter because of the timeline of our piece. We didn't have the time to apply for traditional funding bodies like we normally would with other projects. We also knew that we could shoot on a micro budget, so it was quite a small amount that we needed raised. It was under $2,000. So we went straight onto Kickstarter and sort of begged, borrowed and stole everything we could, and it was a very difficult time to ask people to fund the film. This was leading up to the Christmas shopping period. This was after one of the most difficult economic years that many of us have seen since 2006. So it was very normal that people were a bit hesitant, but there were so many other people that were extraordinarily generous with their donations and saw potential in the film and understood how hard the arts industry has been hit over the last year. So luckily we had people, local community people and the businesses that I mentioned who said, you know what, it's not a great time, but we'll help fund you to support some emerging filmmakers.
Really fantastic. Well, it's great. I mean, the fact that you've made it, and I mean, that's one of the things that I've often seen with people from other filmmakers I've seen in the festival, that it's always amazing to see how they do it, because it's always a question that I like to ask people. Well, how did you do it? Because some people self-finance, some people are doing it, because they have to support themselves and do other jobs to do it. But that's cool. So what did you shoot it on? What cameras did you shoot it on?
That really is a question for my brother. I mean, we shot in 4K. but I don't know the name of the camera, but I know it was a very expensive, very nice camera. But as I said,
Okay.
that was very much his domain. So I'm sorry.
Okay. Well, no, that's fine. I mean, that's fine. I mean, I think that gives me an idea. I mean, it was shot on 4K, so that's a good enough thing. So my next question is obviously, I mean, would you like to expand on the ideas of this film into a feature script? Because inevitably what happens is people do a short film and then sometimes they want to change ideas, and do you see it as a potential feature script?
I don't actually. There are shorts I've written that would be appropriate as a kind of proof of concept and that could be transferred into features. But this film came out of a very painful place and a place that felt very situated in 2020. And I think I'm hugely moved by the reaction that we've had from our audiences. And I think that's why it feels like it's something that needs to be left where it is. Actually, it was the perfect expression for us of the loss that we were experiencing in a global sense and a personal sense last year.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's always good because sometimes I like the ideas that, I think in a way sometimes that's what happens with ideas. David Lynch was somebody who, I watched his masterclass and he always said that he never worked from a script. He actually created and wrote down visual ideas and then he just went with it, which is cool. But that's, everybody has their own way of doing it.
Yeah, and ideas are very loyal to you, if you honor them. But then when they're out there, the idea, you kind of have to leave it alone. And I think that's the way this is with Screw the Pooch. It's there now.
That's right, cool. Could you see this film as a catharsis and healing tool for families?
I mean, I wouldn't want to be bold enough to say that I am sure this film is going to help people. I thought it was a very peculiar, strange way to see loss. And when I wrote it, I assumed people would roll their eyes and be like, okay, are you taking the mick out of death? Are you somehow mocking the grieving process? I was concerned that people weren't going to understand the satire and the tragic comedy of it. Luckily, that hasn't happened. I have been surprised that through specificity, we've actually managed to create a level of universality, because I've had people come to me and say, I lost my mother, I lost my partner, not necessarily due to COVID, although many times it was due to COVID. And I used to have conversations with death in the house too. I would chat to death when I was doing the washing up or putting the laundry on. And sometimes I'd get drunk and have a massive face off with death and just tell it what I thought of it. And sometimes I was lonely and actually would chat to it. And so that was a very bizarre emotional experience to have audience members come to me and say, yeah, that's what it looked like for me. But hopefully that's a lesson to myself that trust your instincts, and even if something feels very strange, it may speak to somebody else. You never know.
Okay. So moving on to something a bit more, more creative and stuff. What are your artistic and filmic influences?
Gosh, good question. I love television, actually, which I know is not a good answer when we're talking about film, but I'm a huge television nut. And I mean, even in the last year, there have been pieces that have really, really inspired me, particularly from the younger female writers out there, and directors as well. So people like Michaela Cole, people like Phoebe Waller-Bridge. Obviously, you've got Greta Gerwig coming up with stunning films. I think writing that's not afraid to be just searingly honest, and that normally comes out in a slightly comic way. So yeah, women like them. I mean, not just women, but when I think of people that make me go, oh yeah, I want to do that, those are the names that come to mind.
Yeah, well, Greta Gerwig, I think she's wonderful. I love her quirkiness. I mean, Mistress America is one of my favorite films of recent years.
Isn't it brilliant? Yeah.
Yeah, but I like the idea that it captures that New York bit. I mean, we described it. I was speaking with somebody about it the other day, and we were talking about it being similar to a Woody Allen film in that kind of quirkiness that's there anyway. Okay, so moving on to quite a big topic in the world at the moment, certainly in entertainment, because of one thing or another. Diversity and gender, the big issues at the moment. I mean, where do you feel progress has been made recently? And where do you feel there is improvements for the future?
Gosh, big question. I think diversity has always been an issue. We've just not been talking about it enough, not been doing enough to include every voice at the table. I'm middle class, white. I have a lot of privilege riding with me when it comes to this industry. And it's very important that each of us acknowledge our privilege and ensure that we are supporting progress so that we have every person involved at every stage. For Screw the Pooch, we had 2 men involved, which was my brother and my father. Every other member that we had was a woman, and that was really exciting because that's not the kind of ratio of genders that I'd experienced on previous productions. I think we've got an awful long way to go, actually. I mean, obviously, we've seen huge change post Me Too movement. But if you look at, I mean, it's kind of like Michaela Cole, who I mentioned earlier. If you look at her story and you look at the experience that she had with Netflix, for example, who didn't want to give a young Black woman that kind of power and control over her own story, particularly a story about her own trauma, you see that people, you know, who would give her that opportunity, you see how far she can go and what a role model she can be for all of us, frankly. So I think it's just very much about handing the baton over. I don't think even I have a right to talk too much about it or evaluate it, because I certainly won't be noticing the pain that others are going through. But just keep handing the mic over at every opportunity.
Yeah, very good answer. I mean, I think again, there's a lot to reflect, and I mean, I as a male, as a white film actor and filmmaker myself, I mean, I'm doing my best through the film festivals and through the coverage I do to sort of support as many filmmakers as possible. You know, we were
That's
talking,
wonderful.
and that's what I want to do. You know, I want to, you know, I'll be happy to support people like yourself. I mean,
Thank you.
and you know, if you need coverage, that's what it's about. I mean, we're a very open website, and we like to, you know, champion as much as possible, because you know, you never know who's going to read it. And you know, it's a, you know, it's about having respect for things anyway. So my next question obviously is following on from that, is in terms of for yourself, I mean, for your future work, what issues and themes are you keen to explore?
I don't have a list of themes that I'd like to tick off. I don't have, oh, I'd like to explore the female experience, or I'd like to make sure I write a story about X, Y, and Z. I think if there's any theme that I continue to find joy in pursuing, it is simply the unusual. So the piece that I'm working on at the moment is a medieval period piece about drug addiction. So it's always fusing things that I find just particularly curious. But inevitably, a lot of my characters are women, and I think that that's going to be a really exciting journey for me to continue to just share my perspective on the world, and characters that I didn't perhaps see when I was growing up in film and television. So it's a slightly bland answer, sorry, but there's no sort of
It's
specific
okay. I mean,
tick
you know, that I think the key thing is probably you'll probably discover that in your own creativity in time anyway. I mean, the thing is, you know, an idea, that's the craziness of creativity, is that, you know, we could suddenly stop talking, and in about 10 minutes you've got this really great idea. So
Yeah.
I will let
You
you
come along and you have to just nurture them, and if you don't, they'll leave. Like the amount of times ideas have come to me over the years and I've sort of flirted with them and not honored them and spent the time with them, and 3 years later the exact very specific historical script is in the cinema. So ideas are very loyal to a point. So it's exactly what you just said. Just be open to that.
Okay, so obviously we must talk a little bit about the London Independent Film Festival, which your short is showcasing at. And I just want to know, how does something like this help a filmmaker like yourself? I mean, obviously, in terms of what's happening at the moment, I mean, the online experience has had to sort of be the key to people showcasing their films, because the face-to-face festival, you know, they are actually sitting in a venue, hanging out and physically being with one-to-one, although, you know, there's an optimism now that perhaps we will be seeing the more physical events happening as lockdown is lifted. So I mean, what's been your experience with the London Independent Film Festival in terms of getting your film shown?
I mean, as a production team, we're hugely grateful to the London Independent Film Festival. It was a real turning point for us to be selected at such a prestigious festival, particularly one that by its branding champions first-time filmmakers, emerging filmmakers working on smaller budgets, because it can certainly feel, although of course you want short films of all sizes and calibers at the table to aspire to, when you are working on a micro budget and you are at the beginning of your career or your early stages, it can sometimes feel slightly, you know, you can lack motivation when you consistently see shorts that are on these extraordinary budgets and locations. So it was just very heartening to be included in the festival. And in a very practical way, it's been a great opportunity to meet other filmmakers, to develop new press contacts like yourself, and to hopefully form connections with other festivals too who recognize the name. So it's, in one way, it's a tool, which, you know, I suppose we need to acknowledge that that's why festivals are there, is to support the careers of young people. But at the same time, it's just been really fun just to meet people, even though it's over Zoom. And I'd much prefer to be having a pint with you right now and chatting in a bar, but like, that's just the way it is for now. And I think there's a huge benefit to it being online, which is a sort of, I think the doors of what can be quite a cliquey industry have been opened to the world, and people that could never have before attended Raindance, Liff, Toronto, wherever it be, can now go. And I think that's extraordinary. And I hope that going forward in the future, festivals maintain a hybrid format to democratize film festivals.
Great.
That's just my little point.
We have talked a little bit about this before, because we talked about the logistics of shooting during the pandemic. I mean, in other ways, I mean, how has this global pandemic affected your development and evolution as a filmmaker? I mean, what have been the positives? I mean, obviously we know there are, well, probably some obvious challenges that you've had, but what would you say are the positives of the pandemic for you?
I was very lucky because I work in development, so our work anyway is very easy to be transferred onto Zoom. I obviously know many people who work in production, and that was a totally different ballgame. So I was very lucky to be doing very similar things to what I was doing before, which is sitting in a room on my own and writing, or having meetings with others, because I also work as a script consultant and script editor. The pandemic gave me headspace. I think if we were to sum it up in a sentence, it gave me space to focus on new projects and really give oxygen to some ideas that busy life, you know, even though it was me making excuses, but busy life hadn't allowed before. So I'm trying to be very grateful to that silver lining. Absolutely.
Okay. So my final question is, what are you most proud of about Screw the Pooch?
I'm so proud of this film. I'm just proud that we did it. I'm proud that we managed to go from development to production to post-production and get it out there in, you know, less than 6 months. I'm just, And I'm so thankful to every single person that worked on it and every business that helped fund it. It just felt like a real passion project, this cry into the void of like, we just need to get this expression out here. And it was just the tragicomedy of what we were all feeling inside. So I'm just proud that it's out there at all, and that we did what we did in such a tiny time frame and budget. I'm really chuffed, if I do say so myself.
Well, I think you can certainly say so and be proud of what you've achieved.
Thank
Amy,
you.
this has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for spending time with us.
Thank you, John.
And so where can people get in touch with you if they wanted to sort of, you know, what can you offer people in terms of social media and stuff?
Yeah, I mean, if you wanted to get in touch with me personally, it's www.amybrandis.com, and there's a contact form there. And Screw the Pooch, which is hopefully quite a memorable title, is on Facebook and Instagram. I suppose maybe we could put the handles for that when this video is published.
Okay. Well,
yeah.
What we'll do then is we'll sort something out anyway. But I mean, just generally for people out there, if you want to read the reviews of the festival, you can go to www.filmandtvnow.com. There's reviews and articles and news of all kinds of things on there, and we're forever grateful. So on that note, Amy, thank you very much indeed for your time. We look forward to seeing what your next project is going to be. And of course, stay safe and healthy. And
absolutely.
And we look forward to hearing more from you. And congratulations again on Screw the Pooch.
Thank you so much, John.
Cheers. Thank you.